want to start this off real quick. This is a great minds think alike moment. This is the email I got from our gracious host and board member, Jeremy, back in May. He said, hi, Dan and Enrique. Hope you're doing well. It's been too long. Getting right to it. We like both of your presentations. They're both about open source with LabVIEW from slightly different perspectives. And this is my favorite part. So we're hoping we can combine your presentations into a giant, super open source robot. Is that something you guys think you can collaborate on? And Enrique and I said, yeah, I think we can do that. I think we do that. I think we can handle that. So without further ado, let's start off with Enrique here. He's going to talk about an open source journey.
All right. So I'm super happy to be here in GDevCon NA 2023. My name is Enrique. I'm running a LabVIEW business in Mexico called Panther Lab. So I am a LabVIEW contractor and LabVIEW consultant, CLA LabVIEW champion, and DQMH trusted advisor. I am the developer of Panther Dashboard for DQMH. It's been mentioned several times. So this is an open source project, and this project started as a different and weird idea. And as I start talking about this tool with the LabVIEW community, I get some feedback and some advice from the LabVIEW members. Some of them are here. So this is my presentation about an open source project. As I am going to talk about the community, I thought that it was a great idea to highlight some of the women in our community. And I was starting with Nancy. She is the head of developer relationships. She is trying to improve the LabVIEW user groups. She used to say that. She's a TED speaker and an awesome consultant. There is Hope Harrison. She's the developer of Pain Relief. This is another open source project, and it is awesome. It lets you to create beautiful user interfaces with the capability of resizing and that kind of stuff. So I used that tool to develop my tool. This is Danielle. She's a LabVIEW community leader. She's a LabVIEW champion. She teaches software engineering best practices, especially on open source projects. And finally, Fabiola de la Cueva, also called Fab. So Fabiola is the head and the heart behind DQMH, and she's the author of this awesome book, LabVIEW Graphical Programming, 5th edition. Literally, this book changed my life. She's also my mentor, and I consider her like LabVIEW guru. Every time I have questions, I ask for her help.
And I told you LabVIEW based.
Exactly. So back then, when there wasn't LabVIEW Core 1 and LabVIEW Core 2, there was LabVIEW Basics 1 and LabVIEW Basics 2, and she was my trainer. So this project, Panther Dashboard, is an open source project. You can download the code, clone the repo from GitHub, and you can use the tool, download it from BIPM. And for those of you that are not DQMH developers, I created a small video to encapsulate some of the features that I'm gonna highlight over my presentation. So, Panther Dashboard is a tool that you can call from the tools menu, and this tool allows you to scan your DQMH project, and you can visualize your module's status, and you can also explore your DQMH code to rapidly get into your events and search for the events colors. And you can also actually search for the API tester directly from your tool and search who is launching your modules. And you can call the DQMH scripting tools with some buttons. And there is a new window called DQMH Contest Help, where you can visualize and edit your project description, your modules, and etc. Depending on the user selection, you can visualize the project and the module and the event description. All the descriptions are editable. And finally, we can call Antidoc directly from Panther Dashboard and create these beautiful documents with graphs, relationships between your modules. So this is pretty much Panther Dashboard. And as every journey, every story has a beginning. I was testing DQMH 6.1, and this version came with a new set of BIs called DQMH scripting. And these BIs allow you to scan your project for DQMH modules, scan your events from a specific module, etc. So I started playing with this DQMH scripting API, and I created something like that. It is totally different from Panther Dashboard today, but I was trying to create a tree where there was the modules and the events. So that was pretty much it. But then I started playing with a crazy idea. I was trying to create a generic API tester because I always struggle finding the API testers because I had to go to the Project Explorer and search, and if your modules are under dependencies, searching for the API tester is even harder. So this idea, inside of this idea, I was trying to call the DQMH scripting tools with some buttons. So while I was talking to Fab about this idea, she pointed me to this other open source project for the Swiftly, I don't know if I say it correctly, the Swiftly business. This other open source project enables right-click menu under the Project Explorer when you are using DQMH framework. So this project had pretty much everything I needed to call the DQMH scripting tools. But I realized this project has some context. Every time you select a module and right-click, create an event, this project writes the module being selected. So this contextual behavior I wanted to implement into Panther Dashboard. So right now, if you select the module and you click an event, create an event, the module being selected is being auto-populated for the better developer experience. Did I tell you that I wanted to create a generic API tester? Well, I failed. That generic API tester was too difficult. I was trying to create a BI on the fly, and I was trying to pop up the controls and indicators, pretty much like a wrapper for an event. So it was a crazy idea, I know, but then I eventually dropped that idea. So I am in the LabVIEW Mastermind group with Sam Taggart. So we meet twice per month, 2 times per month, and discuss a lot of different LabVIEW related topics. And there's a section where Sam invited us to discuss someone's bottleneck, and I think that was a good opportunity to talk about my problem. So there was a lot of ideas going back and forth. None of them was an easy idea to implement, but eventually Sam came with an interesting idea. So he said, hey, Enrique, why are you trying to create a generic API tester? Why don't you just call the module API tester? So thinking about this idea, that was pretty much the origin of my problem I was trying to solve. So it was difficult for me to find the API tester, and this idea solved what I was trying to achieve. So every time the user right-clicks a module and select open the API tester, all that I do is to search for the API tester path and then just open it and run it for the user. So this pretty much solved my problem, and I can move forward. Okay, so the next feature I want to talk about is how to call Panther Dashboard. At the beginning of this development, I was trying to, the developer has to drag the Panther Dashboard directly from the palettes to the code. So this feature, this way to call Panther Dashboard was the way to go, because I was unaware of a lot of things like the application instances, etc. But as I started sharing this tool with the DQMH trusted advisors, Dan, and he is with me, he said that this tool is a tool, it's not a development code. So dragging the BI to your code, it was not the best approach to use this tool. So I did my homework and I found this resource, how to call LabVIEW code from different sections of LabVIEW. And then eventually I was able to send Panther Dashboard to the BI leaf. All the project is under BI leaf, but the launcher is under the tools menu. So it was super easy to do, thanks to BIPM for creating this awesome tool to publish code to the community, for the community. And the next feature I want to highlight is how to select the project and the target. So as I was telling you, initially you had to drag the BI to your code to use Panther Dashboard. But I wasn't aware how to LabVIEW can create different application instances. So that's why I dragged the code directly from the palettes. Eventually, Cyril Gambini gave me a lot of advice about how to use the application instance. And then Gore Campbell created a feature request to be able to search for under the targets of the LabVIEW project. So with these two advice, Gore and Cyril, I was able to create this cluster with all the references I needed, and I am using this cluster all across the Panther Dashboard to scan the modules and do whatever I need. Then, I was talking about this tool with another trusted advisor, Christopher Farmer, for the wiring software, and I showed the ability to select a module and visualize if that module is running or idle. And he said, hey, Enrique, that is great, but I want to see all my modules at the same time. So I added a helper loop to continuously pull all the modules status, and I'm searching if they are running or top level or they are just idle. Almost at the same time, Darren helped me doing a code review about Panther Dashboard, and he said, okay, your module 3 now has green and red colors under the modules, but why are not using your icons? Instead of colors, you use icons. So I search for documentation how to set icons into the tree, and this is the result. So this section of the code, I am searching for all the modules and watching and visualizing if they are running or idle, and I just select different set of icons previously loaded at the beginning of the application. Then at GDevCon NA, the last year, I was here watching the presentation, actually with Dan, and we watched this Bowser the Browser project, and Casey showed an awesome feature, the drag and drop. So Bowser the Browser allows you to drag directly the payloads to your code. So this feature is very useful, and I thought it was a great addition for Panther Dashboard. So I searched I forked the Bowser the Browser project, and then I implemented that under Panther Dashboard. So right now the user can drag and drop code directly from Panther Dashboard instead of going to the project and do the old way. That feature was possible, and so at some point last year, Casey and I sit on that table over there and start talking about this feature, and she shared me the secret. So the secret is to open the LabVIEW ini file and type those: super private scripting feature visible and super secret private special stuff true. So with those lines of text under your LabVIEW ini file, you are able to use a new set of invoke nodes and property nodes for BI scripting. So basically, right now in Panther Dashboard, when the user starts dragging, I just create this BI. Basically, I replicated the same code that the browser has, and I search for all the descendants, search for the correct project item being dragged, and then I just call this invoke node and drop the code directly to your development. So initially, last year, Panther Dashboard looked like this. And right now, this is a different version, different user interface. So the user interface redesign was because some of the user of Panther Dashboard complained about the fixed size interface. So why fixed size? Because I didn't know how to create flexible and resizable user interfaces. So searching how to solve that, I got to this video, the Tom McWilliam LabVIEW, YouTube's Tom's LabVIEW Adventure. I don't know if you're aware of this YouTube channel. He has amazing content, and especially in this video, user interface design, splitters, paint, etc. He shared how to use paint relief. So I learned how to use paint relief because of him. And then, after watching this video and failing a lot of times, I was able to create a resizable user interface. So yeah, that was how Panther Dashboard evolved. Then, I don't know if you notice, I used to have buttons, and now I have icons to do all the scripting. So this change, this improvement, is because talking to Matthias Baudot, he mentioned this tool, LabVIEW Controls Generator. I don't know if you are aware of this tool, but it is free. It is an executable. You can upload icons, create a lot of, select different customization, and then you click send. Eventually, after a couple hours or less, you will receive an email with a zip with a link to download a zip file without your CTLs. So this is how I created all the buttons with less effort. But wait, what about Antidoc? So Antidoc is another open source project, and it is implemented under Panther Dashboard. So in one of the DQMH Trusted Advisors meetings, I was talking about implemented this feature of calling Antidoc. So I never opened the Antidoc project. I didn't know how to do that. But eventually I received like a Christmas gift because Oliver Jordan took the time and created a pull request to provide me a button to call Antidoc directly from Panther Dashboard. So this is the pull request. I am grateful that he helped me to implement that. So because of him, now we can call Antidoc from Panther Dashboard. And this is why I think the LabVIEW community rocks, because all of these guys helped me to create a better user experience for the DQMH developers. And thank you, everyone. So my final thoughts. Just a second. This are my conclusions about developing this tool. Is sharing your ideas is the best way to improve them. So I started with an idea, and I ended up with a different version of this idea. The more opinions on your work, I think the better outcome you had. And open source is great for learning, experimenting, because you have the freedom of create whatever you want and whatever you feel like it is the correct way to doing things. And I feel like this open source project was like a LabVIEW gym to do flexing. And there are a lot of valuable resources in the community forums, YouTube, GitHub, etc. So I hopefully you eventually contribute to these LabVIEW resources for the community. Thank you very much.
Enrique, that was awesome. And I think you hit it like on the second, exactly half the time. That was amazing. So I'm Daniel Press. I'll just use the hand. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I'll use this clicker thing. Thank you. I'm from Prime Test Automation. We are a machine builder and systems integrator. So we build a lot of industrial automation along with test automation. So our typical deliverable is a machine that kind of puts something together or does some kind of manufacturing process and then tests it. And I'm a DQMH Trusted Advisor, just like Enrique, certified LabVIEW architect, certified LabVIEW embedded developer, and I'm also now a LabVIEW champion, just like Enrique. Thank you. So while Enrique's presentation was an open source journey, my thought was this standing on the shoulders of giants, which if you hear that phrase, you tend to associate that with Isaac Newton. The quote is, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So you get a higher view. That's actually Isaac Newton standing on the shoulders of giants because it traces back a lot further than that. Some say even as far back as the 4th century. So there's been a lot of standing on the shoulders of giants going on, and I think we benefit from that here in the LabVIEW community. Speaking of giants, I'm not going to top Enrique's, our giants are female, but what I'm going to do is take it in a slightly different direction. I'm going to give you 4 female giants, 2 of whom are fictional. The other 2 are authors. I recently read this book, actually audiobook, which I actually recommend. I think the audiobooks are awesome. Gabrielle Zevin is an author. She wrote a book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I think it's like her 10th novel, but this one has gone like to bestseller and everything. It's actually about programmers. It's probably the first book I've read that dealt with actual developers developing, in this case, games. You got to have a hook, right? It's video games. It's about programmers sort of bonding over the creation of video games, and it's done in a particularly heartfelt and sincere way. And one of the main characters is Sadie Green, who is just an exceptionally gifted programmer. And I can't say enough about this book. It was highly recommended by my wife. So, of course, went ahead and took in this book. It's incredible. I can't recommend it enough. So check it out. Another one is Bonnie Garmis. So another incredible author. This is her debut novel, which is unbelievable. This thing has gone, bestseller and everything. They're actually making a series about this. I think starring Captain Marvel, Brie Larson. So that's going to be exciting. The main character in this story is Elizabeth Zott, who is a chemist. First and foremost, a chemist finds herself doing some things that are somewhat related to chemistry, but not quite chemistry. I don't want to give it away. But between her and her dog, whose name is 630, they get up to some pretty interesting things. This is set back in the late 50s, early 60s, so you can imagine what it was like for a female scientist working in the field back then. There was a lot of adversity. A very compelling story, and I recommend it. So anyway, back to the open source here. So I'm putting up a couple of links right here. The slides will be available after the conference, so you guys can check these out. I'm just going to be kind of running through some examples of how I have looked to open source to solve some problems or to come up with some solutions to things that I was trying to work with. So I'm going to run through some examples. We'll see how much time we get. But I'd like to say here, with open source, it's about come for the application, stay for the code, because open source is more than just, I guess, the sum of its parts, right? The discovery of an open source project usually happens when you're searching for how do I do something. I want a tool to accomplish something. You can download the open source library. You can use it just as it is intended. But if you look under the hood, there's more value there. So you're going to find that if someone took the time to actually build and distribute, deploy, set up a GitHub library and make it public, that those tend to be developers with some experience. They've probably got some best practices going on, and there's a lot you can get out of that. You can also look for ways of connecting LabVIEW to other languages through open source, and of course examples of software development process. So in my case, I was working on adding some features to DTS, which is the DQMH test sequencer that I spoke about here last year. And I've finally gotten access to the code repository. And of course, being that this is the DQMH consortium and we are trying to follow best practices, we are trying to add unit tests to make sure that any new features that we add are properly tested before they go out into the wild. It's just a responsible thing to do. For some of you guys who were around on Monday during the workshop, the general theme was that testing is a good thing. So I said, okay, well, part of the changes that I made is I wanted to make a change to the test step template itself. And my change was in dealing with, if you're not familiar with DTS, that's not important. You can basically think of it as a test step is a module. A module is just a LabVIEW library, an LV lib, that contains a class that's considered a wrapper. The class has a bunch of methods You customize the method for your test step. One of the methods is test result column headers, and that just says, hey, when I run this test step, this is the list of results I'm going to give you. And they have names, and that way you know what your results are. I had a request from a customer to add engineering units, and I thought, well, so in addition to just what the result is, what are the engineering units? And I thought this would be a great place to add the units. So I said, okay, I'll create an additional output from this method that is my list of units. But now I got to create a unit test to make sure that my list of result names and my list of engineering units are the same length, at least, right? So I was like, okay, I created this unit test, but how did I learn how to traverse a project to find all the test steps, the test step modules, and then to go into the test step and find all those methods and actually run the test? And I was like, okay, initially I was a little bit stumped, but then I thought, wait, there's a tool that I know of that does something very similar to that traverses projects and looks for DQMH modules, and it is Panther Lab. Panther Dashboard. So okay, this is what the method looks like. So it originally just had the result column headers. I added the thing with the units. But again, like, well, how do I look through my project in the context of a unit test? Remember, I got to write a VI that's going to look into my project and pull out all these things so that I can actually tell if, you know, me as a developer, if I've gone and made the lists the right size so that they match. Well, Panther Lab Dashboard does this. So I said, well, how does Panther Lab Dashboard do this? Luckily, it is an open source project, right? So you go and you can clone the actual code base. This is kind of the point of what I want to get across, is that if you do this, you get all the code, you can look under the hood and figure out how all those cool features actually work. And you end up learning a lot. So you go to github.com. Usually you can find, if there's an open source project, there's usually going to be a page somewhere that points you to the repository. It's usually going to be hosted on some cloud service like this, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, one of those kind of things. And Enrique created such a page, so I was able to find this. So I downloaded Enrique's code, and I start digging around. I'm like, okay, well, I know the thing lists all the modules in my project. How does it do in that? I found a very suspicious looking case here. It says scan DQMH modules. That looks really promising, right? So I could dig into that and go, yeah, oh, look what's going on here. We are looking at the actual LabVIEW project that is open. We are looking at all the different targets, because LabVIEW projects can have whatever targets. You're allowed to put DQMH modules on whatever targets you've got. We get to traverse all that. We go find all the items in the project, and we look for certain tells. Enrique must have figured this out, that like, oh, look, a DQMH module is going to be one of these libraries that's going to have things like public API, broadcast, requests, private, and module sync. Those are sort of the giveaways of you have a DQMH module in your hands. Okay, so digging a little bit more. A test step is a special DQMH module because it has this class wrapper in it. So I had to kind of take it one step further, but having Enrique's sort of map to go by, that made it fairly straightforward. I just had to add one more thing, which is to say, hey, does it have something called dtswrapper.lv class in it? And if it does, let's go ahead and interrogate that and make sure that we've got that, then we've got a test step on our hands. Okay, so we're going to use the result. We're going to pull out all those paths. We're going to, because it's a class wrapper, we can get the class data. We can actually get the actual instance from that module of that class wrapper, and we can just run the test result column names method and check that the two arrays are the same size. Very simple test, but it needs to work in all cases. And so in order to make that happen, we use all these fancy VI server calls. But the whole point is finding that open source project that I knew existed, that kind of had similar functionality, allowed me to go look through the code and figure out how to do this and solve my challenge, which would have taken me, I mean, I don't know how many more hours if I had to just figure this all out on my own. I'm sure I could get there, but it would have been quite a journey. Okay, so shifting gears, we're moving right through it. Here was another challenge that I had where I had some help from the open source world. And this one actually involved going outside of LabVIEW. This is a production schedule that shows, the blue areas is sort of when production is scheduled to happen, and then the gray areas are when there are breaks. And I had to create an editor so that you could define when there is production time versus scheduled downtime. And this was to, in the context of creating like an OEE tracking system to track the availability of a machine. So there's nothing in LabVIEW that would look like this off the palette, right? I've tried. You can do a lot with XY graphs, charts, that kind of stuff, but you can't quite get it to do that. I would love to see if somebody could do that with the days of the week on this axis and stuff. I mean, there's the picture control toolkit, right? And yeah, you could probably hack around with that and maybe get it to do this, but again, how many hours is that going to take? This is what the implementation kind of looks like. There is this toolkit out there that creates a new, basically a chart. We figure out what our schedule needs to look like. We create the bars. We specify what we want our axes to say and all that kind of stuff. And then it does actually generate a picture for the picture control. So if you go under the hood into when we actually create this thing, what is it actually doing? I was trying to figure out how does this actually work? It seems to add a bunch of attributes all together, right? And then it comes up with this big long string and figures out this sort of some kind of a reference here and comes up with an ID number. It's like, okay, that's fair enough, but I still don't quite know what's going on. This looks like really important VI because everything over there seems to be contributing to it. What's that doing? Look at this. It's got some kind of a secret going on here. You give it this thing that comes from like, look at this. This is like, whoa, okay, we're getting into the operating system here. We're getting this crazy number. It's generating some math. It's coming out. It's basically trying to come up with a unique ID number is what it is. And it feeds that into here. So something must be going on in that. Oh, look, it's Python. The only thing is, this toolkit is 8 years old. This is not using any of the new Python connectivity that LabVIEW has. These guys figured out how to do this 8 years ago. It actually creates this little Python project in your, in a writable folder on your drive. It runs it, passes it a bunch of information, and the thing spits out your image, which is pretty cool. It's actually running a little server. So that's what's going on inside there. Let's take a look inside that VI. All this thing needs to know is, where to stick a file. So if you look at what's going on, it's finding your user application data folder. This open source project is called the Advanced Plotting Toolkit, by the way. And it's generating this file path. Here it comes. It's going to access a command line, tell it to run something. But it's like, what is it running? I don't understand. Hidden in here, this byte array, thank you, that's a zip archive, but it's embedded inside a LabVIEW VI. This thing is writing it, extracting the zip. Right? And I thought, that is one of the cleverest deployment mechanisms I've ever seen. That is just simply an array of bytes. Any file you make can always be decomposed to an array of bytes, which means you can always use this technique in any of your projects to place a file somewhere, on your storage volume. And then if it happens to be an executable file, you can execute it. I thought that was really awesome. So anyway, that was the lesson learned from that, was basically the deployment mechanism that anyone can use, even in older versions of LabVIEW, to do stuff in other languages. Okay, so this next example, we're doing actually okay on time, because I think this is my last thing. This next example deals with something that's been talked about throughout this conference so far, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it, is TDD. Test-driven development or test-driven design. This gentleman, Francois Normandin, some of you guys should know him. He's been around for a while, doing some really amazing stuff. One of his very impressive projects that he undertook was this MQTT broker, which is, if some of you are familiar with like the IoT space, MQTT is a protocol that allows devices to communicate to each other in a fairly lightweight way. It uses a broker to kind of do publish and subscribe and stuff. I think Enrique actually has a toolkit that uses it, right? So, taking inspiration from Francois in the context of trying to figure out how to use unit testing, what Francois did, his approach to this open source project was to say, okay, I want to make an MQTT broker. He just went up and looked up what the spec was for MQTT from the OASIS specification and generated a list of tests for each line of the specification. And just wrote tests for everything in the specification, and then went about developing the code so that each of the tests would pass. And when you run it in Karaya, this is what you get: 108 steps, 108 tests. That's really impressive. And it's a really good example of TDD. So when you hear presenters and you hear your colleagues and everybody start talking about TDD, and they're really trying to impress upon you, write your tests and then write your code. That sounds great. But I was sitting with a gentleman earlier today, I think they said, where's the example of like a pretty good sized project that actually uses this in practice, in reality? Here you go. Okay, so take a look at Francois' code. The MQTT broker itself is amazing, and you would definitely be forgiven for just using it on its face. But you dig in a little bit and you see what he's done here. This is an incredible example of TDD. Here's a slide where I just kind of put some resources just to talk about, since we are from the DQMH world, some ways about learning more about DQMH. As Enrique mentioned, I think I have a link in here for Tom McQuillan, right? Yeah, this was a great resource when I was first getting involved in DQMH, the DQMH Consortium, and of course the podcast, Chris Farmer's podcast out of Australia. These are some great resources to check out. Does anybody have any questions for Enrique or for me? Nothing? Oh, wait, we have a question. Adam.
Tom.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious, this is maybe an obvious answer to this, but was it just from doing your own development, working on your own projects, that you identified some need, some hole in the open source community? Because I've never contributed to open source. I would love to, but part of my thing is, how did you come across, or how did you identify something that would be valuable to actually invest the time in bringing to everybody?
To do this presentation? Okay, so that's a perfect question, because I kind of skipped it in my head. There's a hidden message here. The hidden message is, by doing these types of things that I'm describing, which is to look under the hood of the open source projects, you will inherently become more familiar with that code base. You will become more likely to contribute to that open source project. And that's something, thank you for reminding me. I meant to say that. When a developer creates an open source project, they are usually, maybe they're just looking for recognition, sure, but they're also really inviting the community to participate in what they're doing and saying, hey, you know, if you're interested in this, like Enrique said, if you're interested in this, look at how many people told Enrique, this is awesome. It would be so much more awesome if you added this little thing. And then Enrique went off and did it. That's one way to contribute, is to suggest changes. Another way to contribute is to directly edit the code, do a pull request. There's a question from Casey back here, if anybody's got a microphone, to go over there. So that's kind of the hidden messages.
You can also
get more involved with the open source. Yeah.
Yeah, you can also create feature requests. All the open source projects has the issues tab where you can write. Actually, that's how I get the feature request from Gorg. He wrote, hey, I would like to be able to scan the targets. And I say, yeah, that's a good idea. And I implement. Actually, he posted a snapshot of how that will look like. And yeah, that was awesome.
Cool. Casey.
I didn't have a question. I was just going to follow up on answering Adam's question. If there's a project that you see where there's a feature that's missing, submit a pull request or a feature request or something like that. But if it's a totally new idea, this is what we were talking about earlier, go to the GID Exchange community page. Put something down there, see if it gets traction. Tell people about it. Because that's what we're trying to do there too, is trying to get attention to those ideas. Then when people come and see, like, what can we contribute to? What's needed? They can go there and we can be that bridge for the community to see what's needed.
I love it. Yeah, that's awesome. It's such a cool resource too. I love the Idea Exchange. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you guys.
A special thanks goes out to Kevin Chirey, Quentin Q. Aldridge, Mark Balla, and Jeff DeBoer for their help in filming. And of course, this GDevCon NA 2023 wouldn't be possible without all of our sponsors. Thanks.